The drive from St. Joseph Medical Center to their house on Willow Creek Drive took 14 minutes. Jack Donnelly had counted every one of them during the cab ride, his hand pressed against the stitches beneath his shirt where they'd removed his gallbladder 4 days ago. The painkillers they'd given him dulled the surgical site to a manageable throb, but they did nothing for the exhaustion that had settled into his bones. For days felt like 4 weeks. The hospital bed had been too narrow, the fluorescent lights too bright, and every nurse who'd come to check his vitals had interrupted the already fragmented sleep he'd managed to steal between rounds. But now he was going home. Home to his own bed, his own shower, his own kitchen. Home to Mary and Rowan. He called Mary 3 times from the hospital. The first 2 calls went straight to voicemail. The third time, she'd answered with an edge in her voice, telling him she was handling everything and that he needed to focus on recovery. When he'd asked to speak to Rowan, Mary had said their daughter was taking a nap. That had been yesterday afternoon. The cab pulled into the driveway at 2:30 on a Thursday. The autumn sun hung low and pale over Maple Harbor, casting weak light through the bare branches of the oak tree in their front yard. Jack paid the driver, pulled his overnight bag from the back seat, and walked slowly toward the front door. Each step sent a small jolt through his abdomen, a reminder that his body was still knitting itself back together. He expected the door to swing open, expected Rowan to come running out in her purple sneakers, the ones with the light-up sole she refused to take off even at bedtime. Expected Mary to stand on the porch with her arms crossed, relief and irritation competing on her face. Instead, the house was quiet. Jack used his key. The lock turned with a soft click, and he pushed the door open. The living room looked wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Not ransacked or destroyed. Just off. The couch cushions sat crooked. A stack of mail had spilled across the coffee table. Rowan's toy box in the corner had been left open. Plastic dinosaurs and wooden blocks scattered across the carpet, as if she'd been playing and then simply stopped mid-game. And then he saw her. Rowan lay curled on the carpet between the coffee table and the TV stand, her small body folded into itself like a question mark. She wore the same pink pajamas she'd had on when he'd left for the hospital. They hung looser now, the fabric bunched around her shoulders and hips. Her blonde hair, usually tied back in the ponytail Mary insisted on, fell limp and tangled around her face. She wasn't moving. Rowan. Jack dropped his bag. The sound it made hitting the floor seemed too loud, too sharp. He crossed the room in 3 strides, ignoring the pain that flared in his gut, and dropped to his knees beside his daughter. Her eyes were half open, unfocused. Her lips looked dry and cracked. When he touched her forehead, her skin felt cool and clammy. "Rowan, baby, it's Dad." She blinked, slowly, like it took effort. "Hey there, kiddo." Jack kept his voice soft, steady, even as his heart began to hammer against his ribs. "Can you hear me?" Another blink. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. He scooped her into his arms, feeling how light she was, how fragile. 5 years old, and she weighed almost nothing. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and that's when he felt it, the way her ribs pressed against his forearm through the thin fabric of her pajamas. "Mary!" His voice came out harder than he'd intended. He stood, cradling Rowan against his chest, and turned toward the hallway. On the couch, someone shifted. Jack's gaze snapped sideways. Judy Cole sat in the corner of the couch nearest the window, a paperback novel resting open in her lap. She wore a burgundy cardigan and black slacks, her gray hair pulled back in the same severe bun she'd worn for as long as Jack had known her. The television murmured quietly in the background, some daytime talk show with artificial laughter. She glanced up at him with mild interest, the way someone might look at a neighbor who'd knocked on the wrong door. "You're back," she said. Not a question, just a statement. "What happened to Rowan?" Judy marked her place in the book with one finger and closed it carefully. "She's been difficult this week. She's unconscious. Sleeping." Judy's tone remained flat, unbothered. "She was being dramatic earlier, so I told her to lie down." Jack stared at her. His mother-in-law sat there, calm as glass, while his daughter barely responded to his touch. The wrongness of it pressed against him like a weight on his chest. "Mary," he called again, louder this time. Footsteps sounded from the bedroom. A door opened, and Mary appeared at the end of the hallway. She wore jeans and an old college sweatshirt, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. When she saw Jack standing there with Rowan in his arms, her expression shifted, not to concern, but to annoyance. "Why are you yelling? Why is Rowan like this?" Mary walked closer, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. She glanced at their daughter, then at Jack, then back at Rowan. "She's fine. She's just being stubborn about eating." "She's not fine, Mary. Look at her. Mom said she was fine." The words landed like stones. Jack looked from his wife to her mother, then back to Rowan's pale face. His daughter's breathing was shallow, her chest barely rising and falling beneath his arm. "I'm taking her to the hospital." "Jack, stop overreacting." Mary's voice carried that familiar edge, the one that meant she'd already decided he was wrong and nothing he said would change her mind. "She's been like this all week. It's a phase. Kids go through phases. Kids don't go through phases where they stop moving. You baby her too much. That's why she acts like this." Jack didn't respond. He moved toward the door, adjusting Rowan his arms so her head rested more securely against his shoulder. Behind him, he heard Mary sigh, a sound of exasperation, as if he were the one being unreasonable. "You just got home," she said. "Can't you rest for 5 minutes?" He kept walking. The front door stood open where he'd left it, autumn air drifting through, carrying the smell of dead leaves and distant rain. He stepped outside, moving carefully down the porch steps, feeling the pull of his stitches with each movement. His truck sat in the driveway where he'd left it 4 days ago. He maneuvered Rowan into the passenger seat, reaching across to buckle her in. Her eyes fluttered but didn't open. Her breathing remained shallow. Jack closed the passenger door and circled around to the driver's side. He could feel Mary watching him from the doorway, but he didn't look back. He started the engine, backed out of the driveway, and drove towards St. Joseph Medical Center for the second time in less than an hour. The emergency room intake nurse took one look at Rowan and called for a doctor immediately. Within minutes, Jack found himself standing in a curtained examination bay while 2 nurses worked over his daughter, checking her vitals, inserting in 4-line into her small arm. Rowan whimpered when the needle went in, the first real sound she'd made since he'd found her. A doctor arrived, young and focused, her name tag reading Dr. Patel. She examined Rowan with quick, efficient movements, her expression growing more concerned with each passing moment. "When did she last eat?" Dr. Patel asked. "I don't know. I just got back from the hospital. I had surgery." "Who was caring for her?" "My wife and my mother-in-law." Dr. Patel glanced at one of the nurses, some unspoken communication passing between them. "We're going to run some tests. She's dehydrated and appears malnourished. We need to understand what's been happening." The word malnourished hit Jack like a fist to the stomach. He watched them work, feeling useless, feeling the surgical pain in his abdomen flare back to life as the adrenaline began to fade. Rowan lay on the examination table, small and still, and 4-tube, taped to her arm, monitoring equipment beeping softly around her. How long had she been like this? How many days had she gone without eating, without anyone noticing or caring? The nurses moved her to a pediatric room upstairs. Jack followed, carrying the small bag of clothes and toiletries someone handed him. The room had pale blue walls decorated with cartoon animals. A television mounted in the corner played a muted children's show. The window looked out over the parking lot, gray clouds gathering on the horizon. Jack pulled a chair close to the bed and sat. His body ached. His mind raced. He kept seeing Rowan on the living room floor, kept seeing Mary's annoyed expression, kept hearing Judy's flat voice saying she was being dramatic. He took Rowan's hand in his. Her fingers felt cold. "You're okay now?" he whispered. "Dad's got you." Hours passed. Nurses came and went. Dr. Patel returned with test results: severe dehydration, signs of malnutrition, low blood sugar. They started her on 4 fluids and monitoring. She would need to stay overnight, possibly longer. Jack called Mary once. She didn't answer. He called again. Voicemail. The 3rd time, she picked up. "What?" "Rowan's staying overnight. She's severely dehydrated. The doctors are being dramatic too." Mary's voice sounded distant, like she was talking while doing something else. She'll be fine. Mary, when did she last eat? I don't know, Jack. I had things to handle. Mom was helping. Helping. The word came out sharper than he'd intended. Don't start. I'm tired. The line went dead. Jack sat back in a chair, phone still pressed to his ear, listening to the silence. Then he set it down on the bedside table and looked at his daughter. The 4 drip continued its steady rhythm. The monitors beeped. Rowan's chest rose and fell. He didn't know what had happened while he was in the hospital. Not yet. But sitting there in that sterile room, watching his 5-year-old daughter fight to recover from something that should never have happened, Jack felt something shift inside him. Something cold and clear and absolute. Whatever had happened, whoever was responsible, there would be consequences. Around 8 o'clock that evening, Rowan's eyes opened. Not all the way, just a flutter of lashes, a glimpse of blue-green irises that looked too big in her thin face. Her gaze moved slowly around the room, taking in the unfamiliar walls, the beeping machines, the 4-tube connected to her arm. Then her eyes found Jack. Dad. Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper, rough and dry despite the fluids they'd been pumping into her veins. Jack leaned forward, taking her hand again. Hey, sweetheart. I'm right here. Where are we? Hospital. But you're safe now. You're going to be okay. Rowan's expression shifted. Fear flickered across her face, tightening the corners of her mouth, making her look even smaller. Is Grandma here? The question landed like a punch. No, it's just you and me, kiddo. Some of the tension left Rowan's shoulders. She sank back against the pillow, her breathing still shallow but steadier than before. Jack waited, watching her face, seeing the way her eyes kept darting toward the door as if expecting someone else to walk through it. You want to tell me what happened? He asked gently. Rowan didn't answer right away. Her small fingers tightened around his, and Jack felt the tremor running through her body. Fear or cold or exhaustion, maybe all 3. Grandma was mad, she finally whispered. Mad about what? I didn't eat all my vegetables, and I spilled juice on the carpet. Rowan's voice cracked. She said I was being bad. Jack kept his expression neutral, his voice calm. What did she do when she got mad? Rowan's eyes filled with tears. They spilled over, running down her temples into her hair. She put me in the basement room, the one with the metal door. The words didn't make sense at first. Jack had been to Judy's house dozens of times over the years. He knew she had a basement. Most houses in Maple Harbor did, but he'd only been down there once or twice, looking for Christmas decorations or helping move some old furniture. There were a couple of storage rooms down there, places where Judy kept boxes and seasonal items. He'd never paid much attention to them. You mean at Grandma's house? He asked. Rowan nodded, the tears coming faster now. She said it was punishment. She said I needed to learn to behave. How long were you down there? I don't know. It was dark. There wasn't a light that worked. Rowan's breath hitched. She only gave me water. She said if I cried, she'd leave me longer. Jack felt his jaw clench. He forced himself to breathe slowly, evenly, keeping his voice level. Did Mom know where you were? I think so. I heard them talking upstairs sometimes. The tears kept coming. Rowan curled onto her side, facing Jack, her small body shaking with silent sobs. Jack stood and carefully sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping his arms around her, feeling how fragile she was, how breakable. She pressed her face against his chest and cried harder, 5 days' worth of fear and hunger and loneliness pouring out all at once. He held her. He didn't say everything would be okay, because he wasn't sure it would be. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He just held his daughter and felt the rage building inside him like a storm gathering strength. Mary had known. She had to have known. She'd been at her mother's house all week. She'd said as much in their brief phone conversations. She had known where Rowan was, what was happening, and she'd done nothing. Worse than nothing. She defended it. When Rowan finally cried herself to sleep, Jack eased her back onto the pillow and pulled the blanket up around her shoulders. He sat back in the chair, watching her breathe, watching the steady beep of the heart monitor, and made a decision. This ended now. At 10 o'clock, Mary finally showed up. She walked into the hospital room without knocking, her coat still buttoned, her purse slung over one shoulder. She looked tired annoyed, like this whole thing was a massive inconvenience. "How is she?" Mary asked, but her tone suggested she was asking out of obligation rather than genuine concern. Jack stood. "She's asleep." Mary moved closer to the bed, looking down at Rowan. For a moment, something that might have been worry crossed her face. Then it vanished, replaced by that familiar mask of irritation. "This is ridiculous. She's fine. She just needed some food and water." "She needed some food and water," Jack repeated slowly, "because your mother locked her in a basement and starved her." Mary's head snapped toward him. "Don't be dramatic. Rowan told me what happened. She's 5. She doesn't understand. She understands that she was locked in a room with no light and given nothing but water for days. Mom was disciplining her. Rowan's been impossible lately. Throwing tantrums, refusing to eat, talking back. Someone had to do something while you were in the hospital, feeling sorry for yourself." The words hung in the air between them. Jack stared at his wife, this woman he'd been married to for 7 years, and felt like he was looking at a stranger. "Feeling sorry for myself," he said quietly. "I had emergency surgery, and the world doesn't stop just because you're not around." Mom stepped up. She was helping. Helping. Jack took a step closer, keeping his voice low so he wouldn't wake Rowan. "Mary, our daughter was so dehydrated she could barely move. Do you understand that? Do you understand that she could have died? You're being ridiculous. The doctors said she's malnourished. The doctors are overreacting. Everyone's overreacting." Mary's voice rose slightly. "Mom has raised kids. She knows what she's doing. You just don't like her, so you're turning this into something it's not." Jack felt something inside him go very cold and very still. "How long did you know Rowan was in that basement?" Mary hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. "Answer me." "Mom told me she'd put Rowan in timeout." "How long?" "I don't know. A couple days, maybe." "And you didn't think to check on her? Didn't think to make sure she was okay?" "Mom said she was fine. I trust my mother." "You trust your mother more than you trust your own judgment about our daughter. Don't twist this around, Jack. You're always doing this, making me the bad guy, making Mom the villain. We were trying to teach Rowan some discipline. That's what parents do." Jack looked at his wife, really looked at her, and saw the truth clearly for the first time. Mary wasn't going to understand. She wasn't going to take his side, wasn't going to protect Rowan, wasn't going to stand up to Judy. She never had, and she never would. Because to Mary, her mother's approval mattered more than anything else. More than her husband, more than her daughter, more than truth or safety or basic human decency. "Get out," Jack said quietly. Mary blinked. "What?" "Get out of this room. Right now. You can't kick me out. She's my daughter too." "Then act like her mother instead of Judy's puppet." Jack moved to stand between Mary and the bed, his body a barrier. "Get out, or I'll call security." Mary's face flushed red. "You're going to regret this." "I already regret plenty. Now leave." They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Mary spun on her heel and walked out, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Jack stood there, hands clenched at his sides, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his temples. Behind him, Rowan stirred in her sleep, a small sound of distress escaping her lips. Jack turned and sat back down in the chair, taking her hand again, watching her settle. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the chair beside Rowan's bed, watching over her, and made plans. Act in 1. The house felt different when Jack brought Rowan home 2 days later. Same furniture, same walls, same creaky floorboard in the hallway, but everything had shifted, like walking into a place you used to know, but don't quite recognize anymore. Mary hadn't come back to the hospital after that first night. She'd texted once, asking when they'd be discharged. Jack had replied with the date and time. She'd read the message, but hadn't responded. Now it was Saturday afternoon, and Rowan sat on the couch wrapped in her favorite blanket, the one with the dinosaurs on it, watching cartoons with the volume low. She'd regained some color in her face, but she still looked too thin, too fragile. The doctors had sent them home with strict instructions about diet and hydration, along with a follow-up appointment scheduled for next week. Jack moved around the kitchen, preparing lunch. Chicken noodle soup, saltine crackers, ginger ale. Simple foods that wouldn't upset Rowan's stomach. He could hear the low murmur of the television, could feel the weight of everything that needed to happen pressing against him. Mary was upstairs. He'd heard her moving around when they first arrived, but she hadn't come down to greet them. Hadn't even looked out to check on Rowan. Jack ladled soup into a bowl, set on a tray with the crackers and ginger ale, and carried it to the living room. Rowan looked up when he approached, a small smile touching her lips. "Hungry?" he asked. She nodded. He set the tray on the coffee table and sat beside her, helping her sit up straighter, making sure she was comfortable. She ate slowly, carefully, like someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to have food in her stomach. "Good?" Jack asked. "Yeah." Rowan took another small sip of soup. "Dad, what's up, kiddo? Are we going to Grandma's house again?" The question came out tentative, worried. Jack kept his expression neutral. "No. What if Mom wants to? That's not going to happen." Rowan nodded, but the worry didn't entirely leave her face. She took another bite of crackers, her gaze drifting back to the television. Jack watched her for a moment longer, then stood. "I'll be right back. You need anything, just call for me." "Okay." He climbed the stairs, each step deliberate, and walked down the hallway to the master bedroom. The door was closed. He knocked once, then opened it without waiting for a response. Mary sat on the edge of the bed, her phone in her hands, thumbs moving across the screen. She glanced up when he entered, her expression already defensive. "We need to talk," Jack said. "I'm busy." "Put the phone down." Mary's jaw tightened, but she set the phone aside. "What?" Jack closed the door behind him. He stayed standing, keeping the distance between them. "I want to try counseling." "No." "Mary." "I said no." She stood, crossing her arms. "I'm not going to sit in some therapist's office while they tell me I'm a bad mother and you're the perfect parent." "Nobody's saying that." "That's exactly what you're saying. That's what you've been saying since you picked Rowan up from that hospital." Mary's voice rose. "My mother tried to help, and you turned it into this big, dramatic thing. Your mother locked our daughter in a basement. She put her in timeout. For days, Mary. Without food. Rowan was being difficult. Sometimes you have to be firm with kids." Jack felt that cold stillness settling over him again, the same one he'd felt at the hospital. "I want Judy to stay away from Rowan." "Absolutely not. She's not safe around her. You're being paranoid." "Then let's compromise. Judy doesn't get to be alone with Rowan anymore. If she wants to visit, fine, but one of us is always there." Mary laughed, sharp and bitter. "You want me to tell my mother she can't be alone with her own granddaughter? Do you know how that would sound?" "I don't care how it sounds." "Of course you don't. You never cared about my family." "I care about Rowan." "So do I." "Then prove it. Put her first for once." Mary's face flushed. "I always put her first. I've been here taking care of her while you were in the hospital having your little medical emergency." "Taking care of her." Jack's voice dropped lower. "Is that what you call it?" They stared at each other across the bedroom, years of resentment and unspoken conflict rising to the surface. Jack could see it clearly now, the way Mary deflected, the way she twisted every argument to make herself the victim, the way she refused to admit that anything her mother did could possibly be wrong. Judy had raised Mary alone after her father left when Mary was 8. She'd worked 2 jobs, kept a roof over their heads, sent Mary to college. And somewhere along the way, Mary had learned that questioning her mother meant being disloyal, meant being ungrateful, meant being wrong. "We're done talking about this," Mary said. "Mom made a mistake. She's sorry." "She's not sorry. You don't know that." "I'm going to her house tomorrow," Jack said. "I'm going to see that basement room myself." Mary's expression shifted, something like fear flickering behind the anger. "Why?" "Because I need to know what happened to my daughter. You're just trying to make trouble. I'm trying to understand why my 5-year-old was locked in a room and starved." "Stop saying that word." "What word?" "Starved." Jack took a step closer. "That's what the doctor said, Mary. Malnourished. Dehydrated. Starved. Your mother did that. And you let it happen." Mary's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Get out. This is my house, too. Get out." Jack held her gaze for another moment, then turned and walked out of the room. He closed the door quietly behind him and stood in the hallway, feeling the adrenaline course through his veins, feeling the surgical pain in his abdomen flare back to life. Downstairs, the television still murmured. He could hear Rowan's soft laughter at something in the cartoon. That sound, innocent and fragile, cut through everything else. Jack pulled his phone from his pocket and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for, Daniel Kessler. Daniel had been in his auto body shop 6 months ago after his wife backed into a light pole. They got into talking, discovered they both coached Little League, both liked craft beer, both had that particular brand of dark humor that came from seeing too much of the world's ugliness. Daniel was a family lawyer. A good one, from what Jack had heard. He typed out a message. Need to talk. Can we meet tomorrow? The response came back within minutes. Sure. Coffee shop on Main Street. 10 a.m.? Jack confirmed and put the phone away. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow he'd start getting answers. Judy's house sat 3 miles away on Elmwood Street, a modest 2-story colonial with white vinyl siding and black shutters. The front yard was neat, the bushes trimmed, the driveway swept clean. Everything about the exterior screamed respectability, order, control. Jack parked his truck at the curb Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. He'd left Rowan with Mrs. Peterson next door, the elderly widow who'd lived on Willow Creek Drive for 40 years and made the best oatmeal cookies in the neighborhood. Mary had still been asleep when he left, or pretending to be. He sat in the truck for a moment, looking at the house. The curtains were drawn in the front windows. Judy's car sat in the driveway, a silver Camry she'd bought new 5 years ago and maintained with obsessive attention. Jack got out and walked to the front door. He rang the bell. Footsteps approached from inside. The door opened. Judy stood there in a cream-colored blouse and navy slacks, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She looked at Jack with mild surprise. Then her expression shuddered. Jack. Morning, Judy. What are you doing here? Need to talk to you. Is this about that ridiculous hospital visit? Judy's tone turned sharp. Mary told me you've been making a big fuss over nothing. Can I come in? I'm busy. This won't take long. They stood there for a moment, facing each other across the threshold. Then Judy stepped back, opening the door wider. 5 minutes. Jack walked into the house. It smelled like coffee and furniture polish, everything neat and organized. Family photos lined the hallway. Mary as a child, Mary's graduation, Mary and Jack's wedding, Rowan as a baby. Each frame hung perfectly straight, perfectly spaced. Judy didn't offer him a seat. She stood in the middle of the living room with her arms crossed, her posture rigid. Well, did you lock Rowan in your basement? I put her in timeout. For how long? As long as it took for her to learn her lesson. Which was how long, Judy? A couple of days. Judy's voice remained flat, unbothered. She needed to understand that bad behavior has consequences. She's 5 years old enough to know better. Jack felt his hands clench. He forced them to relax. Show me the room. Excuse me. The room where you put her. I want to see it. Judy's eyes narrowed. Why? Because I'm her father, and I need to know what happened. Nothing happened. She was fine. Then you won't mind showing me. They stared at each other. Jack could see the calculation happening behind Judy's eyes, the weighing of options. If she refused, it would look suspicious. If she agreed, she'd be admitting he had a right to question her. Finally, Judy turned and walked toward the kitchen. This way. Jack followed her through the house. The kitchen looked immaculate. White cabinets, gray countertops, not a dish out of place. Judy opened a door next to the refrigerator, revealing a steep staircase leading down into darkness. She flicked a light switch. A single bulb illuminated the stairs. Jack descended carefully, the wooden steps creaking under his weight. The basement was typical for houses in this neighborhood. Concrete floor, exposed ceiling joists, metal shelving units along the walls holding boxes and plastic storage bins. The air felt cold and damp, carrying the musty smell of old cardboard and mildew. Judy walked ahead of him toward the back corner where 2 doors stood side by side. She opened the left one, a utility closet containing the water heater and electrical panel. Then she opened the right one. The room was maybe 6 feet by 8 feet, barely more than a large closet. Concrete walls, concrete floor, no windows. A single light fixture hung from a ceiling, but when Jack flipped the switch, nothing happened. Dead bulb. A gray blanket lay crumpled in one corner. Next to it sat a small plastic bowl, empty. That was it. No toys, no books, no furniture. Just concrete and darkness and cold. Jack stepped inside, his chest tight. He could imagine Rowan in here, alone, frightened, hungry. 5 years old and trapped in the dark while her grandmother sat upstairs reading and her mother did nothing. He pulled out his phone and opened the camera app. "What are you doing?" Judy asked from the doorway. Jack didn't answer. He took photos of the room, the walls, the floor, the broken light fixture, the blanket, the bowl. He took a short video, panning slowly around the space, narrating quietly. 6 by 8 feet, concrete walls, no windows, door locks from the outside, broken light. "You can't do that," Judy said. Jack finished recording and put his phone away. He turned to face her. "Did Mary know Rowan was down here?" "Of course she knew. We discussed the best way to handle her behavior. And she was okay with it. Mary understands that sometimes children need firm discipline." Judy stepped back as Jack exited the room. "Unlike you, who spoils that girl and lets her run wild." They stood in the basement, the single overhead bulb casting harsh shadows. Jack looked at his mother-in-law. This woman who'd always treated him like an interloper, like someone who'd stolen her daughter away, like a problem to be tolerated rather than family to be welcomed. "Don't come near Rowan again," he said quietly. Judy laughed. It was a sharp, cutting sound. "You can't keep me from my granddaughter. Watch me. Mary will never allow that." "You're forgetting something, Jack. Mary is my daughter. She's been mine for 36 years. You've only had her for 7. Judy moved closer, her voice dropping. "When this marriage falls apart, and it will, she'll be right back here where she belongs. And you'll be gone, just like her father." The words were meant to hurt, meant to remind him of his place in the family hierarchy. Judy had been saying things like this for years, small digs disguised as observations, reminders that Jack would never quite measure up, never quite be good enough. Before, he'd ignored them, let them slide off, kept the peace for Mary's sake. Not anymore. "If you come near my daughter again," Jack said, his voice calm and level, "I will make sure you never see her. I will document everything. I will talk to lawyers and doctors and police. I will do whatever it takes to keep her safe from you. Do you understand?" Judy's smile didn't waver. Tough words from someone who's about to lose everything. Jack turned and walked toward the stairs. He climbed them without looking back, without saying goodbye, without acknowledging Judy's voice following him up. "You can't win against me, Jack. I'm her mother." He walked through the kitchen, through the living room, out the front door. He got in his truck and drove away from that neat, respectable house with its dark secrets hidden in the basement. And somewhere inside him, something hardened into absolute certainty. This wasn't over. This was just beginning. The coffee shop on Main Street was busy for a Sunday morning. Jack arrived early and claimed a table in the back corner, away from the noise of the espresso machine and the chatter of weekend crowds. He ordered black coffee and waited. Daniel Kessler walked in at exactly 10 o'clock. He was in his early 40s, tall and lean, with close-cropped dark hair starting to gray at the temples. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt, weekend casual, but he carried a leather messenger bag that marked him as a professional who couldn't quite disconnect from work. He spotted Jack and crossed the coffee shop, weaving between tables. "Hey." Daniel shook Jack's hand and sat down. "You look like hell. Had surgery last week, and you're already dealing with whatever this is?" Daniel gestured to a waitress, ordering a cappuccino. "Must be important." "It is." Jack told him everything. He started with the hospital, with finding Rowan barely conscious on the living room floor, with Mary's defensive deflections. He described the basement room, pulled out his phone, and showed Daniel the photos and video. He recounted the conversations with both Mary and Judy, the refusal to acknowledge any wrongdoing, the threats and manipulation. Daniel listened without interrupting. His expression remained neutral, professional, but Jack could see the tension gathering around his eyes. When Jack finished, Daniel sat back in his chair and let out a long breath. "That's child endangerment," he said finally. "Possibly abuse, depending on how the prosecutor wants to approach it." "I know. Have you talked to the police?" "Not yet." "You should." Daniel pulled a notepad from his messenger bag. "You should also understand what you're walking into. If you pursue this legally, either criminally against Judy or in terms of custody with Mary, things are going to get ugly. They're already ugly. They're going to get uglier. Daniel clicked his pen. Mary's going to fight you. Judy's going to fight you. And family court it's complicated. Custody cases get messy even when both parents are trying to work together. When you add allegations of abuse, it becomes war. So what do I do? First, document everything. Every interaction with Mary, every text message, every phone call. Keep a journal of Rowan's condition, her emotional state, anything she tells you about what happened. Keep all the medical records from the hospital, the doctor's notes, the diagnoses, everything. Jack nodded. Second, Daniel continued, you need to decide what you want. Are you looking for divorce? Sole custody? Supervised visitation for Mary? No contact with Judy? You need to know your end goal before we start making moves. I want Rowan safe. That's the goal. But we need to define what that looks like legally. Divorce. Primary custody. And Judy doesn't get anywhere near her. Daniel wrote something in his notepad. You'll need to file a police report about what Judy did. Even if they don't press charges, and they might not, given the complicated family dynamics, you want that report on record. It strengthens your custody case. Okay. Third, you need to understand that Mary might not go down without a fight. She might claim you're making this up, exaggerating, being vindictive. She'll have her mother backing her up, and Judy sounds like someone who knows how to present well in public. She does. So you need to be smarter and more prepared than they are. No losing your temper, no threatening behavior, nothing they can twist around and use against you. Daniel looked at Jack directly. I know you're angry. You have every right to be, but you can't let that anger control you. The judges in family court see a lot of angry fathers making accusations. You need to be the calm, rational one who has evidence and documentation. Jack took a sip of his coffee. It had gone lukewarm. I can do that. Can you? Because based on what you just told me, you've already confronted both Mary and Judy directly. That might not play well. I didn't threaten anyone. You told Judy to stay away from Rowan. I did. And you got that on recording? No. Daniel made another note. From now on, every interaction, especially with Judy, you record if possible. Michigan's a one-party consent state, so you can legally record conversations you're a part of without telling the other person. Use that. They talked for another hour, going over details, discussing strategies, laying out timelines. Daniel gave Jack the name of a detective he knew, someone good with family cases. He also gave him the card for a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma. Rowan's going to need help processing what happened, Daniel said. Get her into therapy now. It helps her, and it also creates a record of her emotional state and what she discloses. Courts take therapist testimony seriously. When they finally stood to leave, Daniel put a hand on Jack's shoulder. You're doing the right thing. A lot of fathers would let this slide, try to keep the peace, hope it gets better. But it doesn't get better with people like Judy. It just gets worse. I know. And Jack, brace yourself. This is going to hurt. Divorce always does. But divorce with child abuse allegations? It's going to be brutal. Jack nodded. He already knew. He'd known it since that first moment in the hospital when Mary had defended her mother instead of their daughter. This was going to destroy his family. But his family was already destroyed. He was just the only one who'd accepted it yet. The police station was a brick building on the north side of town, wedged between the public library and a dental office. Jack went there Monday afternoon, after Mary had left for work and Rowan was at her follow-up doctor's appointment with Mrs. Peterson. He'd called ahead, asked to speak with someone about child endangerment. They'd given him an appointment with Detective Lisa Huang, who worked in the Family Services Division. Detective Huang was in her late 30s, with black hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp, intelligent eyes. She led Jack to a small interview room, beige walls, metal table, uncomfortable chairs, and offered him coffee. He declined. Tell me what happened, she said. Jack went through the story again. Each time he told it, the words came easier but felt heavier. Detective Huang took notes, her expression remaining professionally neutral. When he showed her the photos and videos from Judy's basement, something flickered in her eyes. Anger, maybe, or disgust. Your daughter disclosed this to you at the hospital? Huang asked. Yes. Has she said anything since? She doesn't want to go near her grandmother. She gets anxious when Mary mentions visiting Judy. Huang made another note. And your wife was aware the child was in the basement? According to Judy, yes. Mary claimed she thought Rowan was just in timeout. For several days without adequate food? That's what she says. They talked for 90 minutes. Huang asked detailed questions. Times, dates, exact words that were spoken. Who else might have witnessed anything? Jack answered as thoroughly as he could. Finally, Huang closed her notebook. I'm going to be straight with you, Mr. Donnelly. This is a difficult case. Difficult how? Your mother-in-law will claim it was discipline. Your wife will back her up. There are no other witnesses. And while the condition your daughter was in when you found her is concerning, proving criminal neglect is hard when the family dynamics are this complicated. So, when nothing happens to Judy, I didn't say that. I'm going to investigate. I'll talk to Judy, talk to your wife if they're willing to speak with me, document the basement room, talk to the hospital staff who treated your daughter. Huang paused. But I need you to understand that even if I recommend charges, the prosecutor might decline to pursue it. Because it's a family matter, because juries are unpredictable with cases like this, and prosecutors don't like taking risks on cases they might lose. Huang's voice softened slightly. But that doesn't mean this is pointless. The report will exist. Your lawyer can use it in custody proceedings. And sometimes just having law enforcement involved is enough to scare people into better behavior. Jack thanked her and left. He sat in his truck in the police station parking lot, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. The system was slow, bureaucratic, risk-averse, and while it ground its way through proper channels, his daughter was still living in the same house as the woman who'd enabled her abuse. Something had to change. Soon. That evening, Jack waited until after dinner, after Rowan had gone upstairs to brush her teeth, after the kitchen was clean and the house had settled into its nightly quiet. Then he went upstairs and knocked on the bedroom door. Mary was sitting on the bed, laptop open, scrolling through something. She looked up when he entered, her expression guarded. "We need to talk," Jack said. "If this is about Mom again." "It's about us." Mary closed the laptop. "What about us?" Jack sat in the chair by the window, keeping distance between them. "This isn't working anymore." "What isn't working?" "This marriage." The words landed heavily. Mary's face went pale, then flushed. "You're not serious." "I am. Because of one incident. Because you chose your mother over our daughter. Because you still don't see anything wrong with what happened. Because every time I try to talk to you about it, you shut me down and defend Judy." Jack kept his voice level, factual. "I can't do this anymore, Mary. I can't be married to someone who won't protect our child. I do protect her. You don't. You didn't. And you won't, because doing so would mean admitting your mother was wrong. And you can't do that." Mary stood, pacing to the window and back. "So what? You just giving up? Just walking away? I'm choosing Rowan." "You can choose Rowan and stay married to me." "No, I can't. Because as long as we're married, you're going to keep pushing for Rowan to spend time with Judy. You're going to keep minimizing what happened. You're going to keep making excuses." Jack stood as well. "I'm filing for divorce. And I'm asking for primary custody." Mary's eyes widened. "You can't do that." "I can. And I am. No judge is going to give you custody just because my mother made one mistake in discipline. We'll see." They stared at each other across the bedroom. This space they'd shared for 7 years, where they'd talked and laughed and fought and made love and built what Jack had thought was a life together. Now it felt like standing on opposite sides of a canyon. "You'll regret this," Mary said finally. "When you're alone and struggling and you realize what you threw away, you'll regret it. The only thing I regret is not seeing this clearly sooner." Jack turned and walked out. He went downstairs, grabbed his jacket, and left the house. He drove aimlessly for a while, windows down, letting the cold November air hit his face. Eventually, he parked near the lake, watching the dark water reflect the streetlights along the shore. His phone buzzed. A text from Mary. "Mom's lawyer will be in touch." Jack didn't reply. He sat there in the cold truck, watching the water, and felt something that might have been relief or might have been grief. He wasn't sure which anymore. The divorce papers arrived by courier 3 days later. Jack signed for them at the door while Rowan ate breakfast, keeping his expression neutral so she wouldn't see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands wanted to shake. He waited until she'd gone upstairs to get dressed, then opened the envelope. Mary had hired a lawyer. A good one, apparently. The firm's letterhead was embossed, expensive looking. The papers outlined her demands: joint physical custody with a 50-50 split, shared legal decision-making, and a request that Jack undergo a psychological evaluation to determine his fitness as a parent. The last part made him laugh, bitter and sharp. She was already spinning the narrative, already painting him as unstable, irrational, overly protective. Classic Judy move. Mary had learned from the best. Jack called Daniel. "They're saying I'm unfit?" he asked. "It's a tactic," Daniel replied. "They want to make you look like the problem. It's also a way to drag things out, make the process more expensive and exhausting, hoping you'll give up and settle." "I'm not settling." "Good, because I got some information that helps us." Daniel had been busy. He'd contacted the hospital, obtained copies of all the medical records and doctor's notes. He'd also spoken with Detective Huang, who confirmed that her investigation was ongoing and that she'd documented significant concerns about the condition of Judy's basement room. "We also need to schedule Rowan for that therapy appointment," Daniel said. "The therapist I recommended, Dr. Patricia Morgan, she's good, and she's been a witness in custody cases before. Courts trust her. I'll call today." One more thing. Mary's lawyer is going to request a temporary custody hearing. They'll want to establish a custody arrangement while the divorce proceeds. We need to be ready for that. When? Probably within the next couple of weeks. Jack hung up and stood in his kitchen, looking at the divorce papers spread across the counter. 7 years of marriage reduced to legal arguments and custody percentages. Upstairs, he could hear Rowan singing to herself. Some song from cartoon, off-key but happy. That sound was why he was doing this. That sound was what he was fighting for. He picked up his phone and started making calls. The temporary custody hearing happened on a gray Tuesday morning in late November. Jack wore the only suit he owned, a dark blue one he'd bought from Mary's cousin's wedding 3 years ago. Daniel met him outside the courthouse, briefcase in hand, looking crisp and professional in charcoal gray. "Remember," Daniel said as they climbed the steps, "stay calm. Answer questions directly. Don't get emotional. Don't make accusations. Just stick to the facts." "I know." Inside, the courthouse smelled like old wood and industrial cleaner. Their hearing was in a smaller courtroom on the second floor. Mary was already there, sitting at the opposite table with her lawyer, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expensive suit. Judy sat in the gallery behind them, watching Jack with cold eyes. The judge was a man in his early 60s named Brennan, with reading glasses perched on his nose and a reputation for being thorough but fair. He reviewed the case file while the lawyers made their opening statements. Mary's lawyer spoke first. She painted a picture of a devoted mother suddenly blindsided by vindictive divorce proceedings, a father who'd become erratic and controlling after a medical procedure, who'd made wild accusations against a grandmother trying her best to help during a family crisis. It was masterfully done, reasonable, sympathetic, hitting all the right notes. Then Daniel stood. "Your Honor, this isn't about vindictiveness or control. This is about a 5-year-old child who was locked in a basement without adequate food for days, who was hospitalized for severe dehydration and malnutrition, and whose mother refused to acknowledge the seriousness of what happened. Mr. Donnelly isn't being dramatic. He's being a parent." Daniel presented the medical records. The doctor's notes describing Rowan's condition. The photos and video of the basement room. A written statement from Detective Huang confirming that her investigation had found significant cause for concern. Jack watched the judge's expression shift as he looked through the evidence. Watched him linger on the photo of that concrete room, the blanket in the corner, the broken light. Mary's lawyer tried to counter. She called it discipline taken too far, a misunderstanding between family members, something that could be resolved through family counseling rather than legal intervention. The judge looked unimpressed. He called a 15-minute recess to review everything thoroughly. Jack waited in the hallway, watching Mary talk intensely with her lawyer and Judy. They looked worried. Good. When they reconvened, Judge Brennan delivered his ruling. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm granting Mr. Donnelly primary physical custody pending the final divorce hearing. Mrs. Donnelly will have supervised visitation twice a week, 2 hours per visit, supervised by a court-appointed monitor. Mrs. Judy Cole is to have no direct contact with a minor child until the investigation by law enforcement is complete and this court has reviewed its findings. Mary gasped. Judy stood up in the gallery, her face flushed. This is ridiculous. The judge's gaze snapped to her. Ma'am, sit down and be quiet, or I'll hold you in contempt. Judy sat, but her eyes burned with fury. Judge Brennan continued. Additionally, I'm ordering a full custody evaluation to be completed before the final hearing. Both parents will participate. I want to be clear, these allegations are serious. If the investigation confirms that Mrs. Cole endangered this child, I will consider more permanent restrictions on her contact. The gavel came down. Jack sat very still, letting the words wash over him. Primary custody. Supervised visitation. No contact with Judy. He'd won. For now, at least, he'd won. Mary was crying at the other table. Her lawyer touched her shoulder, saying something in a low voice. Judy had stood again and was heading for the door, her movement sharp and angry. As Jack and Daniel gathered their materials, Judy swept past. She stopped beside their table, leaning down so only Jack could hear. This isn't over, she hissed. You think you've won? You've just made everything worse. For yourself, for Mary, for that brat. Mrs. Cole. Daniel's voice cut across hers, polite but steely. I'd advise you not to make threats in a courthouse. Judy straightened, her face a mask of rage barely held in check. Then she turned and walked out, her heels clicking against the tile floor. Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. You did good, Daniel said quietly. Now comes the hard part. What's the hard part? Everything else. The weeks that followed were strange and disjointed. Jack moved through his days on autopilot, work at the auto shop, picking Rowan up from school, cooking dinner, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories. Normal life with an undercurrent of constant tension. Mary came for her supervised visits. She arrived at the court-appointed facility exactly on time, stayed exactly 2 hours, and left without making eye contact with Jack. The first few visits, Rowan had been withdrawn and quiet. Gradually she warmed up, but Jack could see the confusion in his daughter's eyes, the questions she didn't know how to ask. Why wasn't Mommy at home anymore? Why couldn't she see Grandma? Why did everything change? Jack did his best to answer honestly without burdening her with adult problems. Sometimes families need to live in different places for a while. But we both still love you very much. It felt inadequate, but it was all he had. Dr. Patricia Morgan, the therapist Daniel had recommended, began seeing Rowan twice a week. Jack waited in the reception area during the sessions, flipping through magazines he didn't read, listening to the quiet murmur of voices from behind the closed office door. After the fourth session, Dr. Morgan asked Jack to step into her office alone. How's she doing? Jack asked. She's processing a lot. Dr. Morgan was in her 50s, with kind eyes and gray hair cut short. Her office was warm and comfortable. Soft lighting, plush chairs, bookshelves full of child psychology texts. She's experiencing some anxiety, especially around themes of confinement and punishment. But she's resilient. Children often are. Will she be okay? With time and support? Yes, I believe so. Dr. Morgan folded her hands in her lap. But I need to tell you something. Rowan has disclosed additional information during our sessions. Jack's stomach tightened. What information? The basement incident wasn't the first time Mrs. Cole used isolation as punishment. According to Rowan, there were other occasions, being locked in bedrooms, being sent to sit in closets. And Mrs. Cole apparently used food restriction as discipline on multiple occasions. Mary knew about this? Rowan believes so. She remembers her mother and grandmother discussing her behavior and agreeing on consequences. Jack closed his eyes. He'd thought, hoped, that the basement had been an aberration, a one-time lapse in judgment. Knowing it was part of a pattern made everything worse. I'll be providing a report to the court as part of the custody evaluation, Dr. Morgan continued. I want you to know that my professional opinion will be that Rowan needs stability and protection from further exposure to Mrs. Cole. I'll also recommend that Mrs. Donnelly complete a parenting course and individual therapy before unsupervised visitation is considered. Thank you. Mr. Donnelly, you're doing the right thing. I know this is hard, but you're protecting your daughter. That matters. Jack nodded, not trusting his voice. When he left Dr. Morgan's office, he sat in his truck for a long time before starting the engine. The criminal investigation moved slowly. Detective Huang called Jack periodically with updates. She'd interviewed neighbors, obtained search warrants for Judy's house, reviewed medical records. The prosecutor was reviewing the case to determine if charges would be filed. It's looking likely, Huang said during one call. The evidence is compelling, but I can't make any promises about the timeline. I understand. One thing you should know, Mrs. Cole isn't making this easy. She's refusing to cooperate, claiming harassment. She's also gotten herself a lawyer. Of course she has. They're arguing that she was well within her rights as a grandparent to discipline the child, that the basement room was an acceptable timeout space, that you're exaggerating for leverage in the divorce. Jack felt his jaw clench. She locked a 5-year-old in a concrete room without food. I know, and we're building a case that reflects that. But these things take time. Time. Everything took time. While the wheels of justice ground slowly forward, Jack lived in limbo. Divorced but not divorced, custody settled but not settled, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The custody evaluation process was exhausting. A court-appointed evaluator named Robert Chun conducted interviews with Jack, with Mary, with Rowan. He toured both houses, reviewed all the evidence, spoke with teachers and doctors and neighbors. He spent hours asking questions, taking notes, observing interactions. Mary became increasingly hostile. When Jack dropped Rowan off at supervised visits, Mary would make cutting remarks just loud enough for him to hear. Tell your father, I need the child support check. Make sure your father doesn't brainwash you about Grandma. Your father is trying to ruin our family. Jack didn't respond. He followed Daniel's advice. Document everything, stay calm, don't engage. But sometimes, late at night, when Rowan was asleep and the house was quiet, Jack would sit on the back porch and feel the anger burning inside him. Anger at Mary for choosing Judy over their daughter. Anger at Judy for being a monster dressed in respectable clothes. Anger at a system that moved so slowly while his child suffered. He didn't act on the anger. He controlled it, channeled it, used it as fuel to keep fighting. But it was there. Always there. In mid-December, 3 weeks before Christmas, Detective Huang called. The prosecutor is filing charges, she said. Criminal child endangerment, 2 counts. 1 for the basement incident, 1 for the pattern of food restriction. Jack sat down heavily on the couch. When? The warrant will be issued tomorrow. They'll bring Mrs. Cole in for processing. What happens then? She'll be arraigned, probably released on bail. Then we go to trial, or more likely, her lawyer negotiates a plea deal. Will she go to jail? Hard to say. First offense, her age, the family dynamics, she might get probation, community service, mandatory counseling. Or the judge might throw the book at her. Huang paused. Either way, it'll be on her record, and it significantly strengthens your custody case. Jack thanked her and hung up. Tomorrow, after tomorrow, there would be no more denying, no more minimizing, no more pretending it hadn't been that bad. Tomorrow, Judy would face consequences. They arrested Judy on a Thursday morning. Jack learned about it from a text message from Mary. You did this. You ruined her life. He didn't respond. That evening, the local news ran a small story about the arrest. The reporters stood outside Judy's house, describing allegations of child endangerment, showing footage of police officers leading a gray-haired woman in handcuffs to a cruiser. Jack watched it once, then turned off the television. Rowan was doing homework at the kitchen table. She looked up. Is everything okay, Dad? Everything's fine, kiddo. She went back to her math worksheet. Jack watched her, this small, resilient person who'd been hurt by the people who were supposed to protect her. She was drawing better now, sleeping through the night without nightmares, slowly returning to the bright, curious child she'd been before. But the wounds were still there, still healing. Always would be, probably. The final custody hearing was scheduled for early January. Christmas came and went in a blur of forced normalcy. Jack and Rowan decorated a small tree, baked cookies, watched holiday movies. Mary had Rowan for a supervised visit on Christmas Eve. She'd cried when it was time to leave, though Jack wasn't sure if the tears were for her daughter or for herself. Judy didn't attend her arraignment. Her lawyer entered a not guilty plea on her behalf. The trial date was set for March. Mary stopped speaking to Jack entirely. All communication went through lawyers. She showed up to her supervised visits, but looked increasingly haggard, increasingly broken. Part of Jack felt bad for her. She'd lost her marriage, her mother was facing criminal charges, and her life had imploded around her. But mostly he felt nothing. She'd made her choices. Over and over, she'd chosen wrong. The week before the final custody hearing, Jack received Robert Chen's evaluation report. It was 43 pages long, dense with psychological terminology and legal citations. The recommendation was clear: primary physical custody to Jack, with supervised visitation for Mary until she completed parenting classes and therapy. No contact between Rowan and Judy pending the outcome of the criminal trial. Jack read the report 3 times, making sure he understood every word. Then he called Daniel. "We're going to win." "Yeah," Daniel said. "I think we are." The final hearing was almost anticlimactic. Mary's lawyer fought, argued, presented character witnesses who testified to Mary's devotion as a mother. But the evidence was overwhelming. The medical records, the therapist's testimony, the custody evaluator's report, the pending criminal charges against Judy. Judge Brennan reviewed everything with the same thorough attention he'd shown at the temporary hearing. Then he issued his ruling. Primary physical custody to Jack. Supervised visitation for Mary, gradually transitioning to unsupervised, pending successful completion of court-mandated therapy. No contact between Rowan and Judy unless and until the criminal case was resolved in a manner the court deemed acceptable. The divorce was finalized. Child support was established. The house would be sold, assets divided. It was over. Jack walked out of the courthouse with Daniel beside him. The January air felt sharp and clean. Behind them, he could hear Mary crying in the hallway, could hear her lawyer's quiet, consoling voice. "How do you feel?" Daniel asked. Jack thought about it. "Tired." "That's fair." Daniel shook his hand. "You did good, Jack. A lot of fathers wouldn't have fought this hard." "She's my daughter." "Yeah, that's exactly why you won." They parted ways in the parking lot. Jack sat in his truck for a moment, looking at the courthouse in his rearview mirror. Then he drove to Rowan's school to pick her up early, the way he'd promised. She came running out when she saw his truck, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Jack opened the door and she climbed in, buckling herself into the booster seat. "We done with the boring stuff?" she asked. "Yeah, kiddo. We're done. Can we get ice cream?" "It's January. Ice cream doesn't care about winter." Jack laughed, the first real laugh he'd had in months. "You're absolutely right. Ice cream it is." They drove to the ice cream parlor on Main Street, the one that stayed open year-round despite the Michigan winters. Rowan got chocolate chip cookie dough. Jack got coffee. They sat in a booth by the window, watching people walk by bundled in coats and scarves. Rowan ate her ice cream methodically, savoring each bite. "Dad," she said after a while. "Yeah. Are we going to be okay?" Jack looked at his daughter, this strong, brave little person who'd been through too much and was still fighting to understand a world that had hurt her. "Yes," he said. "We're going to be okay. You promise?" "I promise." And sitting there in that ice cream parlor, watching Rowan smile around her spoon, Jack believed it. Act N3. Spring came slowly to Maple Harbor. The snow melted in patches, revealing dead grass and mud. Trees began budding. The days grew longer. Jack and Rowan had settled into a new routine. Mornings were breakfast and getting ready for school. Evenings were homework and dinner and bedtime stories. Weekends were parks and libraries and sometimes just staying home building blanket forts in a living room. Mary's supervised visits continued. She completed the court-mandated parenting classes and started therapy. The supervision requirement had been lifted in March, though Rowan still showed hesitation about overnight visits. They were working on it slowly. Mary had moved into an apartment across town. She got a new job, something in medical billing. She looked different now, thinner, older somehow. The defiance had burned out of her. replaced by something quieter. Resignation, maybe, or acceptance. She'd stopped defending Judy. That had happened after the criminal trial. Judy had eventually taken a plea deal, 2 years probation, mandatory counseling, community service. The prosecutor had pushed for jail time, but Judy's lawyer had argued successfully that she was a first-time offender, elderly, suffering from the stress of the situation. The judge had split the difference. During the sentencing hearing, Jack had sat in the gallery and watched Judy stand before the judge. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, she'd looked small, diminished. The judge had been direct. "Mrs. Cole, you abuse your position of trust as a grandmother. You endangered a child in your care. Your actions were cruel and unacceptable. The only reason you're not going to prison is because the victim's father has expressed concern that incarceration would further harm his daughter by traumatizing her mother. But make no mistake, if you violate the terms of this probation, if you come anywhere near that child, I will send you to jail without hesitation. Do you understand?" Judy had nodded, her voice barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." She'd walked out of the courthouse alone. Mary hadn't come to the hearing, hadn't spoken to her mother in weeks, according to what Jack had heard. The relationship between Mary and Judy had finally fractured, not because of anything Jack had said or done, but because reality had become impossible to deny. Now it was late April, and Jack stood on the shore of Lake St. Clair with Rowan beside him. They'd driven out after school, the way they sometimes did when the weather was nice. The water stretched out before them, calm and blue, reflecting the afternoon sun. Rowan bent down and picked up a smooth stone. She examined it carefully, then threw it toward the water. It skipped once before sinking. "Not bad," Jack said. "You can do better." "Probably." He found his own stone and sent it skipping across the surface, 3 bounces before it disappeared. Rowan applauded. They stood there for a while, taking turns throwing stones, not talking much. The lake lapped gently at the shore. Seagulls called overhead. "Dad," Rowan said eventually. "Yes, sweetheart." Dr. Morgan said, "I don't have to come see her anymore." She said, "I'm doing really good." "That's great news." She said, "I'm brave." "You are brave." Rowan picked up another stone, turning it over in her hands. "I don't think about the basement much anymore." "Good. Sometimes I do, but not like before." "That's normal, kiddo. Some things take a long time to stop hurting." "Does it still hurt for you?" Jack considered the question. He thought about everything that had happened. The hospital, the confrontations, the divorce, the court battles. He thought about Mary and Judy and the family that had broken apart. "Yeah," he said honestly, "sometimes it does. But we're okay anyway." "We're okay anyway." Rowan nodded, satisfied. She threw her stone toward the water. This time it skipped twice. "I'm getting better," she announced. "You are." They stayed until the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Then they walked back to the truck, and Jack helped Rowan climb into her booster seat. "Can we get pizza for dinner?" she asked. "Sure. With extra cheese? Is there any other kind?" She grinned, that bright, uncomplicated smile that reminded Jack why he'd fought so hard, why he destroyed his marriage and alienated his wife's family, why he'd endured months of legal battles and sleepless nights. This moment, this smile. He drove them home through the quiet streets of Maple Harbor, past the familiar houses and parks, past the coffee shop where he'd met with Daniel all those months ago. The town looked the same as it always had, peaceful, suburban, normal. But Jack's life would never be normal again, not in the way it had been before. His marriage was over. His daughter carried scars that would probably last a lifetime. His relationship with Mary was cordial at best, hostile at worst. He'd made enemies, burned bridges, torn apart a family. And he'd do it all again without hesitation. Because some things were more important than keeping the peace. Some things were worth fighting for, even when the fight cost everything. Later that night, after pizza and homework and the bedtime routine, Jack tucked Rowan into bed. She'd requested 3 stories instead of the usual 2, and he'd read them all, doing voices for the different characters, making her giggle. "Dad," she said as he stood to leave. "What's up? The basement can't get me anymore, right?" The question still came up sometimes, especially when she was tired or stressed. Jack always gave the same answer. No, sweetheart. It can't get you. I won't let it. Promise. Promise. Rowan snuggled deeper into her blankets, her stuffed dinosaur clutched against her chest. Her eyes were already drooping, sleep pulling her under. Love you, Dad. Love you too, kiddo. Jack turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her breathe. Then he walked downstairs to the living room. The house was quiet, peaceful, safe. He sat on the couch and looked out the window at the street beyond. Somewhere across town, Mary was probably in her apartment, maybe thinking about the same things he was thinking about. The life they'd had, the family they'd almost been, the future that would never happen now. Somewhere else, Judy was serving her probation, attending court-mandated counseling, living with the consequences of her actions. And here, in this house on Willow Creek Drive, Jack Donnelly sat in the quiet darkness and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not happiness. That would come later, maybe if they were lucky. Not forgiveness. He'd never forgive Judy for what she'd done, and he wasn't sure he'd ever fully forgive Mary for enabling it. But peace. The knowledge that he'd done everything he could, that he'd made the right choices even when they were hard, that his daughter was safe. That was enough. That had to be enough. Jack stood and locked the front door, checked the windows, turned off the lights. Then he climbed the stairs and went to his own room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, single fatherhood, coordinating with Mary, healing the wounds that still remained. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, his daughter slept safely in her bed, protected and loved. Tonight, the basement couldn't reach her. And that, Jack thought as he closed his eyes, was what victory looked like. Not perfect, not easy, not without scars, but real and hard-won and worth every sacrifice. He'd torn apart his life to save his daughter, and given the choice, he'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because that's what fathers do. They fight. They protect. They stand between their children and the darkness, no matter the cost. And sometimes, when they're lucky and brave and unrelenting, they win.